Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and welcome to a little update on patch 9.1. As we've gotten some new information today with class changes and a bunch of Mythic Plus changes, so I will go over those now. One thing that's been absent so far today has been a patch date, so hopefully that's still coming, but maybe it's not, so it's still no idea exactly when this patch is coming out. But let's get started with the big news, I think the biggest piece of news, which is Storming nerfs. Storming is getting the old triple nerf. Usually this is reserved for pesky, overperforming specs that aren't supposed to be good. So it travels much slower. It always travels in the same direction now, it's always traveling clockwise. And it despawns when hit by a single player, which means it's not going to barrel through a group and hit all 5 players anymore. And it means that you can't get hit by the same tornado twice, right? Like, you can't have it hit you and then come around and hit you again the next time it goes through. And it means as soon as it hits one person, you don't have to think about dodging it anymore. In effect, I think these 3 nerfs are going to combine to dramatically reduce the pain of this affix. In particular, this third one will really help make it so that it doesn't disproportionately impact like a melee-heavy comp, because a melee-heavy comp will probably be spreading those storming hits among more players now, and they'll still despawn, right? So that'll actually make it potentially even, there's an argument that that is a good thing as well. If it's, if just every storming, you kind of assume it's going to hit somebody, but it's spread randomly among two melee DPS and a tank, not a big deal. It'll still, of course, be best to dodge these if you can, but sometimes it's easier said than done. Alright, what other news do we have here? There's some boss tuning. Presumably, Prideful going away. They're taking a look at some of the harder bosses and lowering some numbers. So Dealer Zaexa, one of the actual bosses that I think is most obliterated because of Pride, and really actually quite hard. There's pretty big damage nerf here to the Arcane Lightning direct damage, and the Arcane Vulnerability is no longer increasing all Arcane damage, it's just increasing Arcane Lightning damage by a slightly larger amount, but it means that you're not going to get that huge hit of other Arcane damage at the same time, right? And kill you. Hakar, there's this change here on Blood Barrage, where instead of this 14-second word, it has this until cancelled. Until cancelled is a weird thing when it shows up in tooltips that it's hard to say exactly what this is going to mean. This might mean that they're changing it so that it'll be interruptible. This might just mean that the Blood Barrage will continue indefinitely until the shield is broken through. I'm not 100% sure. One clue here is it looks like it might be possible to interrupt it just by using an interrupt, because the Blood Barrier no longer has the text here to become immune to interrupt effects. That would be kind of weird if you just, immediately hit your interrupt as soon as that ability started coming out and it worked. But, yeah, this will warrant some investigation for sure. Amarth is doing a little bit less damage there on the Tortured Echoes cast. And Crixus is doing a little bit less damage on the Juggernaut Rush, which is the soak that you need to get your whole group in for that line. So, potentially this will be lethal with one less person soaking in, or... which is nice. And then Opportunity Strikes. This is a bit of a weird one. You may be like, what is this ability? You remember that mob they removed from the first boss fight of Theater of Pain? Well, for some reason, they buffed the damage done by her ambush. But as of this point, she's still removed from the game, Zero the Underhanded, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. But yeah, this is her, right? This is, Zero the Underhanded. This is the mob from that first boss, that rogue that sometimes showed up, and they removed a while ago, so... Yeah, no idea what's happening there, but the value was changed on that number too, so we'll stay tuned. Maybe they're adding her back in. Then finally, we also have some class balancing changes coming in here too. Not the kind of wide sweeping changes that some folks were looking for here. The highlights, according to Wowhead, we've got Kill Command's buff for Survival, so Survival single target. Seems like a very good thing to buff. Some Shadow Priest PvP nonsense, that's not my area of expertise. The Shaman Night Fae Covenant Legendary is getting a buff, which is potentially... I mean, Night Fae Elemental, at least, is already pretty great. That's already something that I think is probably the best all-around option for that spec right now. A lot of people are playing Necrolord on that right now, but on Tournament Realm, a lot of tournaments you've seen them playing Elemental, and I think that's something that, you've seen them playing Night Phase, so we'll see. And then the Demonology Warlock talent has also gotten a buff as well. Demo was already looking pretty good from my understanding. I don't know whether they play this talent or how big of a buff it is or anything like that, though, so if you're a demo lock, you may have more info than me about that. Other than that, we're mostly looking through here, and there's a couple of tooltip changes. Looks like the buff to Kill Command was a 15% damage buff for survival single target. Yeah, they're baking in all this. This is, yeah, again, this is basically a tooltip change here for Prop Paladin. There's that PvP talent change, so nothing really major, I would say, going on here. A couple of these are like Covenant Legendary effects here that are being clarified or slightly reworded. Again, I don't think this is a functional change, and this one is, but it's fairly minor. And then, yeah, there's the Soul Strike, which actually, if this is new, then that's a pretty big buff to that damage of that talent. And there's that Soulbind as well, the armor fragments, which it looks like it's just changed to percent instead of raw value of stat, but I don't know how much that's going to be. Anyways, there's a look at what's happening in the patch. Not too much going on with the specs. Really, the only thing here that I would say is really going to be impactful if you're playing one specific spec is if you're playing Survival Hunter, the Kill Command buff, pretty big. I think that's none of these are really likely to change too much of the metagame or anything like that, so nothing too much to pay attention to there. But the nerfs to Storming and the nerfs to these bosses, particularly Dealer Ixaxa, Crixus, I think those bosses have been ones that have plagued different players at different times, myself included, so it'll be good to have them be a little bit toned down, especially, again, in a world without Prideful. Oh, and one last thing. Just as I was about to make this video live, there's another nerf that's been discovered, which is to the Necrotic affix, a very welcome affix to see a nerf for. This one is a little bit of a strange nerf, though, because it's kind of invisible. So the way it works is that Necrotic will now apply a stack on every other melee swing, which, fun fact, it's worked that way on bosses since BFA. It's been that way for ages on bosses. But you can see from this log here, it's every 2 successful autos from Trash now is applying Necrotic. And that is going to dramatically slow down the rate that you gain Necrotic stacks. It doesn't, fundamentally do too much to the affix besides that, right? It's just going to change the slope of the stack acquisition. But that should be a pretty big nerf to the affix in practice, right? In terms of, like, a pull where you would get 40 stacks before, you'll now get 20. You could maybe still drop your stacks as well in spots where you otherwise couldn't have, but it probably won't change too much of those sorts of things, right? For the most part, you'll probably, except for in very edge cases where you got to refresh, like in a spot where in the previous patch you got to refresh right at the last second, now you maybe will get to drop your stacks instead. But other than that, it shouldn't change too much besides that slope. But pretty sizable nerf to the affix. Again, kind of a weird one. It seems like kind of a stealth nerf, the sort of thing that maybe Blizzard is even surprised is being detected here, but it has indeed been detected, and just in time as well for me to edit my video and re-upload it before I put it live. So anyways, thanks for watching, etc. Bye.